The strangest part wasn't that the princess came back, I tell you now. The strangest part was that we had already buried her. My name is Tarek Voss, Royal Archivist of the Veiled Dominion, and for 23 years I believed history moved in one direction. Empires rose. Empires fell. Heroes died. The dead stayed dead. Then came the day that shattered every lesson I had ever recorded. The funeral of Princess Seraphina Vale was supposed to unite the kingdom. From every corner of the Dominion, ships arrived in orbit above the capital. Pilgrims filled the avenues. Veterans stood in silence beneath banners draped in silver and black. Even the skies seemed darker than usual, covered by thick clouds that rolled above the crystal towers of the royal district. Seraphina had been more than a princess. She had been a symbol, brave, intelligent, unusually kind for someone born into power. When news arrived that her command vessel had been lost during the Battle of Ashera Reach, the entire Dominion mourned as one. Official reports stated there were no survivors. The wreckage had been scattered across thousands of miles of empty space. Recovery teams found almost nothing. No distress signal. No escape pod. No miracle. By noon, nearly 1 million citizens filled the Grand Plaza. Giant holoscreens displayed images from Seraphina's life. Children held flowers. Elderly veterans saluted. The atmosphere felt less like a ceremony and more like the ending of an era. Then the king stepped forward. King Aldrich Vale looked older than I had ever seen him. His shoulders sagged beneath ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine. When he began speaking, even the wind seemed to stop. "Today," he said, his voice echoing across the plaza, "we honor a daughter of the Dominion." Thousands lowered their heads. Some openly wept. Others stared silently at the empty royal coffin positioned beneath a monument of white stone. Empty because there had been nothing left to bury. Nothing except memory. I remember looking toward the horizon and wondering whether history would remember this day as the moment hope disappeared. Then every alarm in the plaza activated at once. The sound cut through the ceremony like a blade through paper. Heads snapped upward. Guards reached for weapons. Pilots scrambled toward emergency stations. Above the city, a single vessel emerged from the clouds. It wasn't military. It wasn't royal. In fact, it looked completely wrong. Small, scarred, burned along one side. Foreign. The identification system struggled to classify it before finally displaying a designation few people had ever seen in person. Human. A wave of confusion spread through the crowd. Humans rarely visited Dominion territory. Fewer still arrived unannounced during a royal funeral. The ship descended slowly until it hovered above the plaza. Then it landed. The engines powered down. The ramp lowered, and one lone figure stepped into view. He wore no armor, carried no visible weapon, offered no greeting. Behind him, attached to a cargo harness, was a battered emergency pod blackened by fire and scarred by damage. The stranger stopped at the foot of the ramp and looked directly toward the royal family. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the human spoke 6 words that changed the course of our history forever. "Your princess never died out there." For 3 full seconds, nobody reacted. The human stood alone at the center of the plaza while nearly 1 million citizens stared at him as if he had just announced that the stars themselves were falling. Then the noise began. Angry voices erupted from every direction. Royal guards rushed forward. Military officers demanded explanations. Several members of the High Council began shouting over one another so loudly that their translation devices struggled to keep up. Through it all, the human never moved. He simply rested one hand on the damaged emergency pod and waited. King Aldrich stepped down from the ceremonial platform. The grief that had weighed on him moments earlier was suddenly replaced by something far sharper. Hope. Dangerous hope. "State your name," the king commanded. The human nodded once. "Nathan Cole." His voice remained calm. No dramatic speech. No attempt to impress anyone. "Terran Recovery Division." A murmur spread through the crowd. Most citizens had never heard of such an organization. I certainly had not. One of the royal admirals pushed through the gathering. Admiral Veyron was famous for his discipline and famous for his distrust of outsiders. "Impossible," he snapped. Recovery teams searched the entire combat zone. There were no survivors. Nathan looked directly at him. "Your recovery teams searched where the battle happened. I searched where the current carried the debris afterward." The admiral frowned. "That makes no sense." It did to me. The answer only made him angrier. Around us, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to suspicion. Citizens who had been mourning moments earlier now whispered theories. Some believed the human was lying. Others thought he was attempting some elaborate political manipulation. A few simply looked terrified. The emergency pod attached to his harness certainly did not help. Its outer shell was blackened from atmospheric entry. Deep scratches covered the surface. Entire sections looked as though they had barely survived whatever journey had brought them here. One council member pointed toward it. "Open it." Nathan remained still. "Not yet." That single answer nearly started another uproar. You arrived during a royal funeral. You claim the princess is alive. You refuse verification. Accusations came from every direction. Nathan listened without interruption. It was the strangest thing. Most people become defensive when surrounded by hostility. Others become emotional. Nathan Cole seemed almost detached from it. Not arrogant. Not frightened. Simply patient. As though he had expected every reaction before he ever landed. Then something happened that silenced the plaza. A small voice called out from the crowd. A young girl no older than 10 years old stepped forward, holding a silver flower. "If she is alive," the child asked, "why did you bring her here?" The question cut through the chaos because it was honest. Nathan looked at the girl for several seconds before answering. Because she wanted to come home. Suddenly the plaza became quiet again. Not completely silent, but quieter than before. The words felt real in a way the arguments did not. King Aldrich stared at the emergency pod. His hands trembled. Slightly. "Open it," he said softly. This time Nathan nodded. He turned toward the battered capsule and reached for the release mechanism. Every eye in the Dominion seemed fixed on that single motion. The release mechanism clicked. A simple sound. Quiet. Ordinary. Yet somehow it echoed across the Grand Plaza louder than any speech ever given there. Every citizen seemed frozen in place. Every camera focused on the battered capsule. Every member of the royal court stared without blinking. Nathan pulled the handle and stepped back. Nothing happened. For one long second, the pod remained closed. Then a thin stream of white vapor escaped from the seams. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The life support system was still functioning. Impossible. According to every official report, the vessel had been drifting through space for nearly 3 weeks. No emergency pod should have remained operational for that long. Admiral Veyron immediately noticed it too. His expression darkened. "That cannot be authentic," he said. "The power reserves alone would have failed days ago." Nathan did not argue. He simply watched the capsule. That calmness was beginning to bother people. Citizens expected dramatic explanations. They expected anger after being accused of deception. Instead, the human acted like a man waiting for a clock to finish counting down. Another council member stepped forward. Minister Doran, a politician whose confidence usually filled every room he entered. "This is a fraud," he announced loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "An opportunist arrives during a royal tragedy carrying a damaged pod and expects us to believe an impossible story." Several voices immediately agreed. The mood began shifting again. Hope gave way to suspicion. Suspicion became frustration. Then came the accusation that changed everything. "Perhaps he found her remains," Doran continued. "Perhaps he disturbed a royal recovery site. Perhaps he is nothing more than a grave robber seeking attention." The words spread through the plaza like wildfire. Grave robber. Within seconds, thousands were repeating it. Nathan finally looked away from the capsule. Not angry. Not offended. Just tired. As if he had heard worse before. "You think I crossed 11-star systems for attention?" he asked quietly. "I think you crossed them for something," Doran replied. "And I intend to find out what." Several guards advanced. Not aggressively. Carefully. Uncertain. Their commander glanced toward the king for instruction. King Aldrich remained silent. His eyes never left the pod. Something about the scene felt wrong. Not because of Nathan. Because of the people accusing him. I remember studying their faces. Most looked frightened rather than skeptical. As though they desperately wanted the human to be lying. As though the alternative scared them more. Then a sound came from inside the capsule. A faint metallic chime. The kind emitted by medical systems when a patient shows improvement. The entire plaza froze again. Doran stopped speaking mid-sentence. Admiral Veyron turned sharply toward the pod. Nathan glanced at the display screen mounted beside the hatch. For the first time since arriving, a faint smile appeared on his face. Not triumph. Relief. Genuine relief. The capsule emitted a second tone. Then a third. Green status lights illuminated across its surface one after another. Life signs detected. The words appeared on the external monitor for everyone to see. Suddenly nobody cared about accusations anymore. Nobody cared about politics. Nobody even remembered the funeral. A million eyes locked onto a single screen while one impossible question echoed through the Dominion. If Princess Seraphina was truly inside that capsule, then who had wanted the entire galaxy to believe she was gone? The screen continued glowing. 3 simple words. Life signs detected. Yet instead of celebration, fear spread across the royal platform. I noticed it immediately. Not among the citizens. Not among the soldiers. Among the leadership. Faces that should have been filled with relief suddenly became difficult to read. Minister Doran looked as though someone had pulled the floor out from beneath him. Another council member quietly stepped backward. A third lowered his eyes entirely. Nathan noticed it too. I could tell from the way his attention shifted away from the capsule and toward the people surrounding the throne. He was studying them, measuring reactions, looking for something. King Aldrich finally broke the silence. Open it completely. This time his voice carried authority again. Not grief. Not uncertainty. A king giving an order. The capsule responded with a low mechanical hum. Internal systems awakened one by one. Medical indicators flashed across the outer display. Oxygen stable. Neural activity stable. Recovery sequence active. Every update made the crowd lean forward a little farther. Hope was becoming real. That was when Nathan spoke. Before the hatch opens, there is something you need to know. Nobody interrupted him. Even the ministers remained silent. The princess did not survive because she was lucky. His eyes moved across the royal court. She survived because someone wanted her missing, not dead. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Confusion spread immediately. What does that mean? Demanded Admiral Veyron. Nathan folded his arms. Her ship did not fail naturally. Murmurs erupted across the plaza. The navigation systems were altered. More murmurs. The distress beacon was disabled. The noise grew louder. Then Nathan delivered the final piece. And someone transmitted false confirmation of her death before any search team arrived. The plaza exploded into conversation. Citizens stared at one another. Officers checked data pads. Advisors whispered frantically. Every official report had stated the same thing. Catastrophic loss. No survivors. No uncertainty. No possibility of recovery. Yet if Nathan was telling the truth, someone had known the outcome before it was possible to know. King Aldrich's expression hardened. You have evidence? Nathan reached into a pouch attached to his belt. He produced a small metallic data core no larger than a human hand. Recovered directly from the escape pod. The king's eyes narrowed. And what is on it? Nathan answered immediately. The last transmission Princess Seraphina received before her ship disappeared. Complete silence followed. Even the wind seemed to stop. A final transmission meant a sender. A sender meant a source. And a source meant answers. 4. The first time, genuine concern appeared on several faces within the royal court. Nathan slowly handed the data core to the nearest royal technician. Play it after she wakes, he said. She deserves to hear it first. Then he looked directly at King Aldrich. Because when that recording is played, everyone in this kingdom will learn the same thing I learned. The king stared at him. And what is that? Nathan's voice remained calm. Almost disturbingly calm. The enemy was never on the battlefield. At that exact moment, a soft tone sounded from inside the capsule. The final recovery indicator turned green, and the hatch began to open. The hatch separated with a slow hiss. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire Dominion seemed suspended between two realities. In one reality, Princess Seraphina Vale had died 3 weeks ago. In the other, she was about to step back into history. Cold vapor drifted across the platform as the interior became visible. Medical lights illuminated a narrow chamber lined with recovery equipment. Then I saw her. Princess Seraphina sat upright inside the capsule. Pale, exhausted, thinner than I remembered, but unmistakably alive. A sound spread through the plaza unlike anything I had ever heard before. Relief, shock, joy, disbelief. Thousands of emotions merging into one voice. Several citizens immediately began crying. Others dropped to their knees. Some simply stared because their minds could not process what their eyes were seeing. King Aldrich took a single step forward, then another. The ruler of an interstellar kingdom suddenly looked less like a king and more like a father seeing his child after a nightmare. Seraphina? His voice barely carried across the platform. The princess blinked against the daylight. Her eyes slowly focused on the crowd, then on the throne, then on her father. A faint smile appeared. "Hello, father." The king covered his mouth with one hand. Around him, members of the royal household openly wept. Even Admiral Veyron looked stunned. Every official report, every military analysis, every declaration of death, all of it had been wrong. Yet while most eyes remained fixed on the princess, mine drifted toward Nathan Cole. The human stood quietly several feet away. No celebration, no attempt to claim credit. He looked almost relieved to be ignored. That struck me as strange. Most people who accomplished the impossible wanted recognition. Nathan appeared interested only in making sure she had survived. Seraphina slowly stepped from the capsule. Medical monitors protested immediately, flashing warnings across the display. She ignored them. The crowd erupted into applause. It rolled across the plaza like thunder. Millions watching through planetary broadcasts joined in. The princess raised one hand in acknowledgement before her expression changed. Her eyes swept across the royal platform, studying faces, measuring reactions, looking for something or someone. The applause gradually faded. "Where is Commander RHYSS?" she asked. The question seemed innocent enough, yet the reaction it caused was immediate. Several council members exchanged nervous glances. Minister Doran suddenly became interested in the floor. Admiral Veyron frowned. "Commander RHYSS is overseeing border operations," he replied. Seraphina stared at him for several seconds. "No," she said quietly. "He was on my flagship." The plaza grew silent again. The princess turned toward her father. He received the final transmission before the navigation systems failed. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Seraphina looked directly toward Nathan. "Did you recover the data core?" Nathan nodded once. "Yes." The princess closed her eyes briefly. Not from weakness, from certainty. When she opened them again, there was something different in her expression. Not fear, not confusion, determination. "Then we finally know the truth," she said. And for the first time since arriving, Nathan Cole looked toward the royal court and asked a single question. "Would anyone here like to explain why the princess was abandoned before we play the recording?" No one answered Nathan's question. The silence itself became an answer. Across the royal platform, expressions shifted from confidence to calculation. People who had spent their careers speaking suddenly had nothing to say. Princess Seraphina noticed it too. She slowly turned toward the assembled council and studied them one by one. "Interesting," she said softly. 3 weeks ago, some of you could not stop giving orders. Today, none of you seem eager to speak." Minister Doran forced a nervous laugh. "Your Highness, surely this is a misunderstanding." Seraphina looked at him for several seconds. "Then help me understand." The minister opened his mouth and closed it again. Around him, several officials avoided eye contact entirely. The crowd was beginning to notice. Citizens who had arrived expecting a funeral were now witnessing something entirely different. Every broadcast network in the Dominion was transmitting live. Every reaction, every expression, every uncomfortable pause. King Aldrich stepped forward. "Seraphina," he said carefully, "tell us exactly what happened." The princess nodded. She seemed exhausted, yet her voice remained steady. "After the battle, our flagship received an encrypted priority transmission. Murmurs spread immediately. Priority transmissions were restricted to a handful of senior officials. The message ordered us to change course," she continued. The authorization codes appeared legitimate. Admiral Veyron frowned. "Who sent it?" "That is the question I spent 3 weeks asking myself." Seraphina glanced toward Nathan. "Until he found me." For the first time, many citizens truly looked at the human. Not as an outsider, not as a curiosity, as a witness. Nathan remained as calm as ever. "When I located the escape pod, Princess Seraphina was more concerned about the data core than her own rescue." A faint smile crossed her face. "Because I knew the answer was inside it." The royal technician approached carrying the recovered data core. "Your Majesty," he said, "the recording has been verified. It is authentic." A ripple of tension swept through the platform. Authentic. That single word eliminated dozens of excuses. King Aldrich nodded. "Play it." The technician hesitated. "There is something else." "What?" asked the king. The technician swallowed. The transmission was not sent from outside the Dominion. Complete silence followed. Even the crowd seemed to stop breathing. The implication was impossible to ignore. Whoever altered the princess's course had not been a foreign enemy. They had been someone with access. Someone trusted. Someone close. Seraphina slowly closed her eyes. I knew it. When she opened them again, she was no longer looking at the crowd. She was looking directly at a specific section of the royal platform. Several officials visibly stiffened under her gaze. Nathan noticed it immediately. So did I? The human folded his arms and quietly asked, "Do you recognize someone?" Seraphina gave a small nod. Not from the transmission. Her eyes never left the group. From their reaction to it. Suddenly, the mystery was no longer about who had saved the princess. It was about who had expected her never to return. And judging by the fear spreading through part of the royal court, more than one person already knew the answer. What happened next revealed more than any recording ever could. The moment the technician announced the transmission originated from inside the Dominion, several officials began behaving very differently. Most stood frozen. A few looked confused. But 3 members of the royal administration immediately started whispering among themselves. It was subtle, almost invisible. Yet after weeks spent surviving alone in deep space, Princess Seraphina noticed everything. "There," she said quietly. King Aldrich followed her gaze. The 3 officials instantly stopped talking. Too late. Thousands of citizens had already seen it. So had every viewer watching the live broadcast. Minister Doran stepped forward with a forced smile. "Your Majesty, surely we should move this discussion somewhere private." That suggestion changed the atmosphere immediately. Private. The word sounded reasonable. It should have sounded reasonable. Instead, it made people uncomfortable. Seraphina folded her arms. "Private?" she asked. "The entire Dominion was informed of my death publicly." Doran hesitated. "This situation involves sensitive information." "My disappearance involved sensitive information," Seraphina replied. Yet someone seemed comfortable discussing that without me. A ripple of approval spread through the crowd. Doran's smile weakened. Nearby, another council member quietly activated a communicator hidden beneath his sleeve. Nathan noticed it instantly. I know he did because his eyes moved directly to the device. Yet he said nothing. He simply watched. The official glanced down at the screen and then quickly shut it off when he realized Nathan had seen him. Strange behavior. Very strange behavior. The royal technician finally finished preparing the recovered file. "The recording is ready," he announced. The plaza grew silent once more. Every citizen wanted answers. Every soldier wanted answers. Every member of the royal family wanted answers. Yet before the playback could begin, something unexpected happened. The large public screens surrounding the plaza suddenly flickered. Then they went dark. Gasps spread across the crowd. Seconds later, emergency backup systems activated. The screens returned. But not before everyone had witnessed the interruption. Admiral Veyron's expression hardened. That should not be possible. The technician checked his console. Someone attempted remote access. The word struck the crowd harder than any speech. Remote access. Someone had tried to interfere with the recording. Right now, in front of millions of witnesses. King Aldrich slowly turned toward the council section. Nobody looked comfortable anymore. Not even those who were innocent. Because the truth had become impossible to ignore. Whoever wanted Princess Seraphina gone had not given up. They were still here. Still watching. Still trying to control the story. Nathan finally spoke. When people are confident, they let evidence speak for itself. His calm voice carried across the platform. When people are afraid of evidence, they try to stop it. Nobody argued with him. Nobody could. Seraphina looked toward her father. "Play the recording." The king nodded. "Play it." The technician reached for the command panel. Across the plaza, millions held their breath. Somewhere among the gathered officials, someone knew exactly what was about to be revealed. And judging by the fear spreading across several faces, that person was no longer confident the secret would survive the next few minutes. The recording began. With static, a few seconds of distortion echoed across the plaza before a familiar voice emerged from the speakers. "Commander RHYSS." Instantly, thousands recognized it. The decorated officer had served the Dominion for nearly 2 decades. Trusted, respected, untouchable, which made his next words even harder to hear. "Princess, your new coordinates are attached. Proceed immediately." This order comes directly from the Strategic Council. A navigation file appeared on every public screen. The timestamp matched perfectly. The authorization codes matched perfectly. Everything looked legitimate. Then the recording continued. There are concerns about information security within your current fleet. Trust no one except designated personnel. Seraphina closed her eyes. She remembered receiving that message. She remembered believing it. Around the plaza, citizens exchanged uneasy glances. Nothing sounded suspicious yet. Then the technician advanced the file. Additional metadata appeared beside the recording. Routing logs, verification chains, transmission origin markers. Thousands of lines of information streamed across the screens. Most people could not understand them. The technicians could, and their reactions said everything. One royal analyst suddenly stood up. That cannot be right. Another checked the data independently. It is correct. A third analyst looked physically ill. The authorization path was fabricated. Murmurs exploded across the crowd. Fabricated. The word spread instantly. Admiral Veyron stepped closer to the display. Explain. The analyst swallowed hard. The transmission appeared to originate from Strategic Command. He pointed toward the highlighted routing chain. But it never passed through Strategic Command. The crowd grew louder. Citizens who had never cared about military communications suddenly understood the implication. Someone had forged an official order. Someone with access. Someone powerful. Then another discovery appeared. The false transmission had not been created by a single individual. It carried authorization fragments from multiple council offices. 3 of them. Every eye turned toward the same section of the royal platform. Minister Doran went pale. 2 nearby officials looked as though they wanted to disappear entirely. Princess Seraphina stared at them in silence. Nathan Cole watched them too. Yet unlike everyone else, he did not seem surprised. Almost as if he had expected this outcome from the beginning. King Aldrich slowly rose to his full height. Is there any doubt? He asked. The analysts checked again. Then again. Finally, the lead technician shook his head. None. Complete silence followed. Not confusion this time. Certainty. The Dominion had spent weeks mourning a princess. Entire worlds had honored her memory. Military fleets had lowered their banners. Citizens had cried for someone who was never supposed to return. And now everyone understood why. The false report had never been a mistake. It had been a plan. A plan that failed the moment a human recovery pilot refused to stop searching. Nathan finally spoke. His voice remained calm. Most people stopped looking after the official report. He glanced toward Seraphina. I did not. The princess smiled faintly. Good thing you were stubborn. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. The tension broke for a moment. Then King Aldrich looked directly at the implicated officials. For the first time all day, they seemed genuinely afraid. Not of punishment, not of exposure, but of something else. Something that had not yet been revealed. And when Nathan noticed that fear, his expression changed slightly. Interesting, he said quietly. They are still worried about someone. The realization spread through the plaza slowly at first, and then all at once. The conspiracy had been exposed, yet the people involved still looked nervous. Not defeated, not relieved, nervous. Nathan Cole watched them carefully before turning toward King Aldrich. Your Majesty, when people are afraid after the truth comes out, it usually means they expected someone else to arrive. The statement hung in the air. Several officials immediately lowered their eyes. Princess Seraphina noticed it. So did the crowd. The king folded his hands behind his back and studied the council members who had spent years advising him. Then let us finish. This, he said. Who was giving the orders? No one answered. The silence stretched longer than before. Then something unexpected happened. One of the junior analysts raised a trembling hand. Your Majesty, there is one more file. Every head turned. What file? Asked Admiral Veyron. The analyst swallowed hard. A hidden attachment inside the transmission package. The technician quickly accessed the recovered data. Seconds later, a new message appeared on every public screen. Unlike the forged command, this one was never delivered. It had remained buried inside the system. Forgotten, or perhaps hidden intentionally. The message contained only a single sentence. The crowd read it together. Princess must not be harmed. Keep her isolated until succession proceedings begin. Confusion swept across the plaza. Then understanding followed. Whoever organized the plot had never intended to destroy Seraphina. They had intended to remove her from public view long enough to reshape the future of the Dominion. King Aldrich's expression darkened. A succession plot. The words echoed through the square. Citizens began talking all at once. The kingdom had come within inches of a constitutional crisis without realizing it. Yet what happened next surprised everyone. Seraphina stepped forward and raised her hand. The crowd immediately quieted. "No," she said. "This is not a story about betrayal." The statement seemed impossible. She glanced toward Nathan. "It is a story about persistence." The princess turned back toward the citizens. "Millions believed I was gone because the evidence said so. The reports said so. The officials said so." Her eyes settled briefly on the exposed conspirators. One person looked anyway. The crowd followed her gaze toward the humans standing beside the damaged rescue pod. Nathan looked deeply uncomfortable receiving attention from nearly an entire planet, which somehow made the moment more genuine. Seraphina smiled. "The galaxy keeps underestimating humans." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. They see a quiet stranger and assume he is unimportant. They see a closed case and assume it is finished. Nathan Cole ignored both assumptions. King Aldrich slowly nodded. "Then the Dominion owes him a debt." "No," Nathan replied immediately. "You owe me nothing." The king raised an eyebrow. "Nothing." Nathan glanced at the princess and then toward the countless citizens filling the plaza. "I found someone who wanted to come home." That was enough. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the entire Grand Plaza erupted into applause. And standing there among a million voices, I finally understood why the story would be remembered for generations. Not because a princess returned, not because a conspiracy failed, but because when an entire kingdom accepted the impossible, one stubborn human refused to stop searching. That was the day the Dominion learned something the rest of the galaxy would eventually learn as well. Humans were dangerous not because of their strength. Humans were dangerous because they did not give up,